Good morning. Um, Hi Grace, hi Daniel. We're low numbers today. We've definitely gone quali- Hello. We're quality above quantity this morning. So there's actually more presenters than there are attendees at the moment. We are expecting a couple more people. But we're gonna run through this as we were going to anyway. So we can use this as a little bit of evergreen content, but we would normally have mics shut off and cameras shut off and that kind of thing. But I've allowed everything. So if you want to make it a bit more interactive, if you want to ask questions, if you want to stop presenters at any time, just dive in because there is only a couple of you. Um, it makes my job easier because I don't really need to introduce your IT department to you guys because you already know a fair amount about us. I will kind of skip on and just give you the agenda. So in a couple of seconds, I'll just talk about the speakers that we've got this morning. Um, Adam is going to talk about cracking the case of the inside threat. He's going to do the threat landscape and he's going to introduce cyber essentials. So he's going to be your main speaker today, and we'll talk about his background in a second. Then going to do a little bit of a case study on cyber essentials for one of our manufacturing clients, and that's going to take the form of a bit of a Q&A between myself and Fern. Then, as I say, we've got the questions bit, a few next steps, and we should sort of get away, reasonably around the sort of 40-ish minute, 45-minute mark if we've timed this well. Um, so Adam will be our kind of main speaker today. As you can see, I'm not going to read this out. I hate it when people do that. Read the slides. But 15 years in law enforcement, leading cybercrime teams. He's now worked in cybersecurity for 8 years. I've seen Adam speak at various industry events, and we are really, really lucky to have him. He's a very, very good speaker, and we've got a really good story today. Yeah, he's a top-notch speaker. Really, really happy to have him with us today. Fern, she will tell you that she's not very good at this kind of thing, but she's actually is very good at this thing. I've been on a stage with her in London. She's much better. We've tried not to get her to prepare too much because she's much better off the cuff. Um, but Fern joined us as an apprentice back in 2019. She's a tremendous progress through her career. She's now specialising in cybersecurity, and now doing an applied cybersecurity degree. She recently featured on Knots Today, and as I said, we did a bit at Channel Futures in London for the rest of the MSP community around our journey of implementing cybersecurity in the business. So you've got couple of really, really good, really experienced, really knowledgeable people. And as I say, if you have got questions or anything, it's a great opportunity to speak to these two guys. So that's more than enough for me. So I'm going to hand over to Adam. Take it away.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Craig. So my name's Adam Pilton. I work for CyberSmart, and I'm a senior cybersecurity consultant for CyberSmart. And as Craig mentioned, my background's in law enforcement. So today I'm going to speak to you about a couple of things. First off, I'm going to speak to you about a case that I investigated. Secondly, we're going to look at the results of a survey that CyberSmart commissioned, where we spoke to 1,000 UK decision makers for SMEs with the support of Open Poll, and we asked them how the cost of living crisis is impacting them. And there's some really interesting stats that have come out of that. And then we'll wrap up looking at the threat landscape and cyber essentials before I hand over to Fern. So without any further ado, let's have a look at the investigation I mentioned. So this investigation, it all started with a report of an incident to the police whereby an email had been received by the entire company from their CEO. Now, this email was particularly rude and derogatory towards an individual member of staff. It was brutal, in all honesty. And the message itself had a unique phrase at the end of it. It was signed off from your friendly CEO. And this isn't a phrase that the CEO had used himself. presently or in the past at any point. So it was completely out of character. It was odd. And the CEO now found himself locked out of his account. He wasn't able to access his works account, so they were stumped. But the main thing at this point was the company had no idea who had done this, why they'd done it, and if there were going to be any further incidents, any further attacks, if this cyber attack was over. So there was a real state of tension and uncertainty around the next steps. But this company did have an outsourced IT team. So they spoke with this IT team, and I was told that over the coming days, they were going to conduct an initial quick time investigation and then share this information with me. And this is exactly what happened. A few days later, the IT team informed me that an admin account had actually reset the CEO's password. And that admin account had been accessed by using an O2 IP address. So when I say an O2 IP address, I mean O2, the mobile phone network, so essentially using mobile data. And really interestingly is that an employee in the company had actually found an old email that used the phrase, your friendly IT manager. And this was sent from the now ex-IT manager. So again, tying back that phrase we saw earlier. And when I spoke to the CEO about this, to understand who the ex-IT manager was, he told me that the ex-IT manager had left by his own decision, but it was a case of jump before he was pushed. And the terms that he left on wasn't the best. There's lots of strange incidents surrounding him, stuff that the company could never actually put their finger on, but they're always left with a bad or negative feeling, hence the decision that the IT manager was ultimately forced to make. So at this point, I have three suspects: the ex-IT manager, the CEO, and the current outsourced IT. Now, this is because they either had or have access to admin accounts. So they could create themselves additional admin accounts. They have the level of authority to be able to perform this attack. So I now need to conduct an investigation to understand who of these three or potential others could have conducted this attack. And my investigation is designed to eliminate people as well as bring people forward. So my investigation starts with the ex-IT manager's mobile phone. I want to understand how he uses this phone and ultimately if it's an O2 phone. So I obtained some communications data on the phone. I can see that the ex-IT manager is still actively using this phone. I can see it's using cell sites, which is near the home address that we believe he's at. And crucially, I can see it's using the O2 network. The next step is I spoke with the company in question, the victims, and asked them for access to information relating to the legitimate business accounts that the ex-IT manager had access to. So e-commerce accounts, things like that. And I looked through these accounts and it was really interesting to see that I could see the IPs were showing that he logged on in the office. I could also see that he was logging on at his home address, his home IP. And crucially, I could see he was using O2 IP addresses as well. So I'm assuming tethering from his phone or using his phone to access these accounts. But when I looked at what was actually happening, the usage on the accounts, I could see that activity was happening at all times of day and night, suggesting it wasn't just work, but he was actually using it in the evening. I looked at the specific transactions and I could see that there were lots of orders being placed for items that didn't really seem to align with the company's business. So for example, there was a GPU that cost over £1,000 and I couldn't see any need for this company buying such a GPU. So I spoke with the CEO and questioned him about the purchases that were happening. And it was identified that these purchases weren't at all for the company, and he was actually using the company funds, company accounts to purchase items believed to be for himself. And there was no asset tracking in place. There was no accountability on these transactions. This ex-IT manager was given complete trust to do this. But there was one particular order that stood out to me, and that's because it was delivered on a Saturday. Well, the offices are shut on a Saturday, so it made no sense for it to be delivered then. But there was one person around, and that was the on-site security guard. So I went and spoke with the security guard, and he got out his logbook, and he showed me that on the day in question, he was in fact working. And before the delivery came, the ex-IT manager had visited him on site, and he explained that it was going to be a delivery, and he asked him to take the delivery for him and to give him a call once that delivery was made. And he left his telephone number, the same telephone number that I'd already looked at. Well, the delivery was made, the security guard signed for it, and he then called the ex-IT manager, who came down shortly afterwards to collect this package. So I've now gone from having 3 suspects to having a prime suspect, the ex-IT manager. And this is because he's recently left the company on bad terms, essentially. He used the phrase, your friendly IT manager, the same phrase we saw earlier, your friendly CEO, in the malicious email. He had the ability to be able to create a new admin account. And the O2 IP usage, he had an O2 phone, and he used that phone to access the internet. We saw that through the e-commerce accounts. And finally, his dishonest character. We know that he'd been using his access, the trust that was placed in him, to buy items that were believed to be for himself, with no trace of where they'd now gone. So I revealed my findings to the company. I explained that the IT manager still had access to the company network. It was actively in use and it hadn't been detected. Now, what this meant is the IT manager still had credentials for an admin account that he had created some time ago. He was still logging into this admin account and nobody knew about it. There were no controls in place highlighting that someone from outside their network, who no longer was employed for them, was accessing this admin account. And that admin account had existed for over 12 months. It wasn't active every day, it wasn't even active every month, but it sat there dormant and it wasn't detected. Nobody knew it existed. And ultimately, a lack of policies and procedures across the company enabled this activity, and it prevented anyone being accountable. This includes simple things like making sure that people are offboarded, making sure that when people spend company money, they're accountable for it. When new assets come into the organization, they're registered, they're assigned an owner, and ultimately they're tracked so we know where they are if we ever need to recall them. None of that was in place. It was based on trust and almost tradition. So the outcome, this is where you're all expecting me to say that I arrested the ex-IT manager. I put the overwhelming evidence to him. He admitted his guilt, and then he was appropriately sentenced by the courts. But unfortunately, that isn't the case. The company decided not to take any action, as they didn't want to receive any bad press when this went to court and became public. They didn't want people to know, their customers, partners, clients, that they had poor IT controls in place, that their cybersecurity wasn't up to scratch. Now, I do understand why they made this decision, but I don't agree with it. And that's because this IT manager is now able to be employed by someone else. He has no record for his criminal activities. There's no indication at all that existed. It also is the case that they don't know if the IT manager was working with other people in the organization. But ultimately, for everyone on this call, the reality is that IT manager could be working for us because we don't know who he is. Now, I mentioned at the start of this call the survey that CyberSmart had completed, where we spoke with 1,000 decision makers across UK SMEs to understand the impact of the economic crisis. Now, I'm going to share some of these stats with you now. We found that nearly half of UK SMEs believe they're at greater risk of a cyber attack since the cost of living crisis. 40% of employee salaries have stayed the same or reduced. And 1 in 5 small businesses are either worried about the survival of their business or expect to make a significant pivot in order to survive. So, rather expectedly, we can see the economic crisis is certainly impacting businesses. So we dug a little deeper though, and we found that 73% of decision makers believe they're at a greater risk of malicious or negligent insider threats. 17% believe their employees would seek to harm the company's reputation. 20% believe employees would steal sensitive data. And 22% believe employees would be more likely to make harmful mistakes. Things like clicking on phishing emails. Now, from looking at that, we saw that the focus was very much on the employee. So we turned the tables and we asked business leaders what they would be willing to do in order to ensure the survival of their business. And this is where it gets very interesting. So 7% of them told us that they would actually engage in bribery. 10% would engage in cyber crime, so hitting rival companies with things like a DDoS attack. And 15% said they'd commit fraud. Now, these are all criminal acts. And just by conducting one of them, you risk 10 years in prison. Now, I'll remind you, these are all senior decision makers across UK SMEs. And they're being asked this question in a moment of calm for the purposes of a survey. And if this many of them are prepared to conduct criminal acts, serious criminal acts in that moment of calm, it's a significant cause for concern. And clearly, they need a better strategy. So, just from the case that we've looked at now, we can see the simple strategies that you can implement. The first being employee training and awareness. Simply making sure people understand what an insider threat looks like, that they exist, and the harm they could do ensures people are aware. But then training people so that they understand their policies, they understand when someone's potentially stepping outside of those policies, and then they know how to report it. Means that you're more likely to prevent or detect insider threats should that happen. Access controls and monitoring. Making sure that people have the privileges they need to conduct their day-to-day duties and no more is essential. Now, the IT manager in this case had the access that he needed. He needed admin access to be able to do his job. But where the company fell down was the monitoring of accounts. Now, this ex-IT manager created an admin account that sat there for 12 months and it wasn't active every month. To be fair, for longer periods, over 3, 4, 5 months at a time, it sat dormant. Now, at this point, it should have been picked up. But certainly, when we look at policies and procedures, it should have been picked up by offboarding procedures. When people are onboarded, they should be given the relevant access they need, but certainly when they're offboarded, that is the moment to conduct a thorough review of the accounts they have, the permissions they have, and then to close them down and make sure that they cannot be used maliciously. And then some final stats when it comes to the survey we completed. Half of SME leaders have increased their investment in cybersecurity. But we still found that 13% of companies have no policies at all. And alarmingly, 3/4 of companies that recognize former employees could be a threat to them, they don't have an offboarding procedure. This doesn't make sense. But they need help. They need support from people like your IT to make sure they're aware. But it's not just insider threats we face. Ransomware is a significant threat. And what we're looking at on the screen now is the amount of money that cyber criminals have made since 2019. And we can see that number has steadily increased. And when it comes to 24, we know at the halfway point, 2024 had already surpassed the halfway point of 2023. So the next bar that appears in that graph, we're expecting it to be bigger again. Now, the only anomaly, 2022, on this graph is when Russia invaded Ukraine. And this was when we were all expecting a cyber war to commence. And a primary factor here is we believe that lots of cyber criminals, people with the ability to conduct ransomware attacks, turned their attention to Russia and Ukraine, whether they supported them or not, and their skills and their daily activities were focused here, hence the dip in income for ransomware criminals during that time. There's some final stats on ransomware for you. So 2/3 of organizations were affected by ransomware in 2023. I personally believe that number should be a lot higher. 13% of small and medium businesses experience ransomware attack in 2023, it's not just large organizations that are attacked. If cyber criminals can make any money from a business, they will, even if it's a few £1,000s. And I've seen that multiple times, both working in the private sector and for the police. And a quarter of all breaches involve ransomware attacks. Ransomware is a significant threat on multiple fronts, and it's continuously evolving. So we have to be alive to this threat. And when it comes to understanding ransomware, it's important to understand where it all starts. And it starts from the information we give away. Now, I've created 2 posts here just to highlight potential innocent information we can give away. The post on the left-hand side refers to Janet Smith's daughter, and ultimately it gives away her date of birth by simply celebrating what should be a happy and joyous occasion. And on the right-hand side, we give away information about a favourite place and a pet's name. Now, firstly, all of these elements are core parts of a weak password, but they can also be used to create believable phishing emails that then target us. And phishing emails is where ransomware, malware, is then used or deployed against us. But it's not just phishing emails. We also see text messages. These are a couple of messages from October. The first one on the left, Nationwide, it plays on those social engineering factors. Our banking, so we're immediately fearful, has got a declined transaction that wasn't us. But what they do here is slightly clever, because for those people that are aware you shouldn't click links, this is a telephone number you call. So it takes you straight away into a sense of maybe believing this is true because it's a telephone number. It couldn't possibly be a scam. And on the right-hand side, you can see they're targeting pensioners who have recently lost their heating allowance, but suggesting actually the government have put a new fund in place for them. Simply click this link to follow the procedures and find out. Again, targeting a particular type of market. But one thing I want to highlight is some incoming legislation, which is the Cybersecurity and Resilience Bill. Now, this is due to land and go live at the start of next year. But one thing we're really expecting to see with this is accountability for senior leaders. So thinking back to those senior leaders that ultimately didn't have a strategy, if they were to use the strategies that they spoke about, bribery, crime, fraud, then they will be held accountable for that. And the National Cyber Security Centre, for their annual review of 23, they told us cybercrime is increasing significantly. Exfiltration and extortion tactics used in ransomware is increasing. But the key paragraph for me was this: we have the information and tools at our disposal to defend ourselves. We just need to use them better. This is because we have the tools and technology. There's lots of tools out there. But us as humans, we need to use them better. We need to implement them correctly for our businesses. And this is where your IT will come in and ensure that you are utilizing the tools you have to the best of their abilities. So everything I've spoken about has been leading to this, Cyber Essentials. Now, Cyber Essentials essentially is the basics, it's the foundations, it's the start of your cybersecurity journey. It's been with us for 10 years now, and it's a certification process. Cyber Essentials is a self-assessment. You answer questions that are designed to be answered by anybody. You don't have to be technical, and they cover your people and process and the technology that you use in your organization. And if you meet the required standards and it's signed off by a senior leader in your organization, you'll be Cyber Essentials compliant. Cyber Essentials Plus is essentially a third-party audit of that self-assessment. So a third-party auditor from CyberSmart would make sure that you have got the relevant controls in place. And let me make it really clear, this is the basics. This is step one of a cybersecurity journey. And the National Cybersecurity Centre have told us that of those people completing Cyber Essentials, whether it be their first time, second or more, over 60% of them learn something new by completing Cyber Essentials. And Cyber Essentials covers 5 basic controls: firewalls, secure configuration, user access control, malware protection, and patch management. And just to highlight the importance of Cyber Essentials, I'm not going to go through all of these. There's many positives from it. Now, I'll call out competitive advantage, because I've seen on multiple occasions people achieving Cyber Essentials purely because it gives them access to more business. For example, working with government bodies, they demand that in order to work for them, you have cyber essentials in place. And we're seeing this more and more. And a great example of this is St. James's Place, who said to their 2,800 partners, if you want to maintain your partner status with us, then you have to reach the standard of Cyber Essentials Plus. Well, their partner network did this because they wanted to work with St. James's Place, one of the largest wealth management firms in the UK. And over the following 12 months, St. James's Place reported an 80% reduction in cyber security incidents. So not only is their network more secure, but think about the money, the time that they saved in dealing with and handling all of those security incidents. And this is where I hand over to Fern.
Thanks, Adam. Just give me 2 seconds. I think we're going to do this in kind of a Q&A format. Craig, you're muted if you were trying to talk.
Yes, I was trying to talk.
Fab.
And I
So
thought I'd unmuted myself. But...
the case study that we're using is one of our clients that we've had for a long time. There's a few stats there on the slide. They're in manufacturing, and they've already got some form of security accreditation. So they've got ISO accreditation. They've got around about 40 users, and when we started with the Cyber Essentials journey, they already had managed support plus what we call the unified security package. So it means they already had the tools that kind of we provide in place. So yeah, let's go Q&A.
So do you know what triggered the decision for Infotech to actually start the Cyber Essentials process?
So Infotech, they wanted to go and get some more ISO accreditation. So they were looking into 27701. So that's like data security. But we suggested that they should start with Cyber Essentials and then go to Plus and then to ISO 27701, so that it's part of like more of an ongoing journey.
Grace, did you have a question? Did you want to jump in?
Oh, sure.
I did. Well, first of all, I was going to ask if you could unmute me, but you've already done that.
Yeah.
It was just around. I've got to be honest. I'm not okay with a lot of the language. So sometimes when we have discussions of this nature, I'm not sure. So, for example, I don't know what the unified security package means.
Sure.
And I'm just wondering whether that is something that we also have or whether we don't have it. But yeah, it's there's some of the terminology is unfamiliar, I guess, if you're not in this kind of IT space all the time. So yeah, I just wondered if it's possible to go through that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And know whether or not we've got it.
Yeah, so at the time, the unified security package will have been, so we offer AV, so antivirus and patch management, so where your applications are getting patched automatically as a basic, and then the unified security package was it involves something called a SOC team, so a security operations center team. So if something's picked up in your AV, somebody can kind of deal with that, and that's kind of a 24/7 managed thing. It also includes something called ransomware encryption protection. So that's if it detects multiple files being encrypted on your system, it'll automatically isolate your system so that it doesn't spread further, amongst lots of other kind of features that it provides, like firewall protection as well. So if it detects that your one of your machines is trying to be accessed on a certain port, it will block that automatically. So like, you know, just various security settings that it can implement, as well as something called vulnerability management, which is where once a quarter we'd run a scan on your infrastructure, and we'd get all of the vulnerabilities and we'd go and remediate as many as we could of the critical vulnerabilities on your applications there. Does that make sense? So it's kind of like a proactive trying to patch everything, trying to make sure that there aren't any vulnerabilities on your system as well.
Yeah, it does. It makes sense. I'm just wondering if it's something that we've got or whether it's been.
I can double check.
It sounds like it's a good thing to have.
It's a very good thing to have, but as Adam was saying, it isn't kind of everything to have those tools in place. So where Cyber Essentials comes in is that it's also making you accountable for the policies and procedures that you have, because it's all well and good having all of these things in place, but if you've got somebody that's got an admin account that shouldn't have an admin account, you know, you're just opening your door for no reason, basically. But I can double check and get back to you about whether or not you've got the unified stack, if that's okay.
That is absolutely fine. So with
Awesome.
regards to the policies, one of the things that I wanted to ask the question of is that something that if you take on the project of Cyber Essentials and assisting one of your customers with Cyber Essentials, do you assist with writing the policies?
So I've got a whole bunch of policy templates that were provided by IASME that I can recommend. So you'd either go the full information security policy. So I would recommend like a broad scope information security policy, and you would fill out your own information, but it'd give you like the prompts of what you kind of need to put in there. Or if you're going to be kind of growing as a business, I'd give you a whole bunch of separate policies, because that's probably the best way to do it rather than just having one big document. But yeah, it would be we'd have a discussion and would go with whatever kind of way you wanted to go, and I'd provide templates for you and advise what kind of things that you needed to put in there.
Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you.
Cool.
Lovely, thank you. Right, so going back to Infotech, can you take us through the steps that were taken to get them through Cyber Essentials?
Sure. So firstly, I needed to do an initial assessment, and the initial assessment is usually going through the questionnaire, the Cyber Essentials questionnaire, and then determining which things we need to kind of fill the gaps there. A lot of the time, so with Infotech, for example, the specific gaps that took quite a while were things like machine updates. Lots of people had local admin accounts, and this was because they were utilizing these local admin accounts to use some out-of-date software, because some people have funny setups where they're like, oh, we need an admin account to run this software, but you don't really. So we had to make sure that those were remediated. But on a more general note, not just for Infotech, these gaps can be anything. It can be an out-of-date server, out-of-date software, machines that are out of support, processes that aren't written down, etc., etc. So yeah, we go through that to get them Cyber Essentials certified.
Okay, was the journey for Infotech a fairly typical journey, or were there any?
It was typical, in the sense that there's always some things that trip you up, or there's always some things that take a little bit longer. Like I said, for Infotech, it was the out-of-date software, using local admins, etc., that needed to be rectified. But yeah, for Infotech, it was that. But for other people, it might be unsure about the policies, or they might have a server that's got some crucial software on it that we can't just get rid of. You know what I mean? So you've got to do lots of different things to kind of make sure that you're compliant, and that can take a bit of time sometimes.
I think you've answered the next one, so I'm going to chuck in one. Yeah, I'm going to chuck in one that you're not prepared for. So, what are the advantages to businesses of doing the Cyber Essentials?
Well, as Adam said, a lot of this is becoming kind of required. So when you're looking at your supply chain, this is a big hot topic at the moment. Supply chain needs to be secure. So the people that you're doing business with, how are they keeping themselves secure? Do they care about cybersecurity? Are they going to get hit? And a lot of businesses are asking this now, and they're requiring businesses to have some form of cybersecurity accreditation. That is one massive thing, like massive positive thing from Cyber Essentials, is that you will just be compliant and you will be showing people that you are taking cybersecurity seriously, and you're not just, you know, keeping on and firefighting rather than being proactive. Another thing is users becoming more interested in cybersecurity. So if you go to your business and you say, we're implementing Cyber Essentials, we've got to do these certain things, your users are going to say, well, why? Why can't I have an admin account? Why do I have to do this phishing training? Why do I have to do this, that, and the other? And it's then a good conversation opener, because you can say, well, actually, it's because of these reasons. And people become more cybersecurity aware. So I think it's excellent for cybersecurity awareness as well. And also, obviously, you're just going to have better cybersecurity, and you're less likely to be breached and ransomed, which is also a huge bonus in my book anyway. So yeah.
Another one that I've not let you prepare for. Typical, an idea of typical timescales and what makes the whole process take longer.
Typical timescale would be, I don't know, 3 weeks to a month. And this timescale, I'm giving you this timescale because a lot of the time people forget or aren't cooperative. That's what takes such a long time in most instances. If you've not got anything wildly out of date in your infrastructure, then the thing that's going to take the longest is cooperation with us to get your systems back on track, or to get your policies up to scratch. So that's why it takes 3 weeks to a month usually for our clients. We've had some clients that, you know, it doesn't take that long at all. It takes a couple of days. They've already got everything in place. They've already got everything up to date. It's fantastic. But yeah, that's just an average from me.
That I chucked that one in because I know when I'm sort of asking you questions on has this one gone through yet, because I'm getting hassle from further up. It is often the case that we are waiting on the client to come back to us, and it needs to be a two-way and a cooperative process, because we're asking questions of the client, and it's about, when we talk about the policies and procedures, we can supply templates, but it's very difficult. We can't write those for you because it's about ways that you work.
But then,
so
then you can check
helpful.
those. So like we can help to check them. Like, so we're here to help with all of these things, and that's really important to note. And the faster you get through all of those things, the faster you can get Cyber Essentials compliant. And also, we could just tick, because it's a self-assessment questionnaire. Realistically, you could just fill them out. We don't want to just fill them out. We want to do it properly and make sure that we've got all of these settings confirmed. So, you know, it's for cybersecurity at the end of the day. So you want to make sure it's done correctly, everything's confirmed, and there's buy-in from the client and there's buy-in from us. So yeah.
Lovely, thank you, Fern.
No problem.
Is there any further questions from anybody for either Adam or Fern? No. Oh,
I've got some. Sorry, very quickly.
No, keep going.
One of the things that we're looking at the moment is mobile phone usage, mobile phone security, as well as our kind of, laptop. And sorry, I'm not an IT person, you can probably tell. But the thing that's kind of confusing is not understanding what's available and what we can actually do with phones, because a lot of the bias for the work that we've been doing with yourselves has been based around laptops and desktops and servers and things. It would be good if we can tie all that together, because I appreciate that, there's a lot of security requirements on a company phone, particularly if it's housing a lot of sensitive information. So when it comes to the cyber essentials, does that take into account other devices that are, I don't know, transportable, let's say? So
Yeah, it does.
yeah, it
It
does.
does.
Okay.
It covers all mobile devices that access any kind of company data. So it cover all those mobile devices. And yeah, the best way to get them all managed correctly is getting them centrally managed. Oftentimes you can do something like that through Intune, but it depends on your Microsoft 365 licensing. So if you're interested in some information about those kind of things, I can get some information back to you after this.
That would be amazing. Thank you. Yeah,
Cool.
that's great.
No worries.
Anything else? Yes, Daniel. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Brilliant. Thank you all very, very much. Apologies about the camera. I'm using desktop instead of the app for some reason, and I've not given permissions for the camera. So apologies on that. I've been here listening.
No problem.
Very, very good. Thank you very much. A couple of questions. Obviously, we're cost sensitive. I know for a fact that we are, and we do have a server that's maybe a little bit out of date. It's out of warranty, so that there's lack of updates on that. Absolutely fine. And I've got to get it into the budget for next year. Is it possible? Do you have a template questionnaire that I could scan over, or is it just look online, have a quick look? No doubt they're available. And also, you mentioned about the phishing training. It is something that I want to implement across the business. Do you have, for example, any templates on that as well? Something that I could present internally for security reasons?
So with the Cyber Essentials questionnaire, you can go online and get the most recent version of it. However, I can also see if I can find that and pop that into. Do you have access to the chat and the webinar after?
Yeah. Everything is as normal on Teams. Just the fact
because
that
I can just
I'm
find the
using
link
the web
for you and
browser.
paste it in. That's
Thank
absolutely
you.
fine. And then you can have a quick read through and just see how you kind of feel like you're sitting there.
Yes.
Cool. And then what was the second question? Sorry.
Phishing training.
Phishing
Basically
training,
just
right.
security training, because we've got some young members of staff, we've got some older members of staff, and I don't think either age group are particularly well versed in phishing and what to look out for. Like the email that Adam mentioned from your beloved CEO, much loved CEO. It's interesting that I think some people may pick it up, but others will just may not. So kind of little key things to look out for.
Yeah, so we do sell phishing training services. So we go through a third party to provide ongoing phishing training. Regarding like things to look out for, I'm sure we've got some kind of PDF or something like that was sent out as just a quick what to look out for. But I really, 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 really recommend actual phishing training rather than that, because it's so ongoing and ever changing. And to be honest with you, a lot of people take a look at those, take a look at that one training email that you send out or training sheet, and then they forget it. So yeah, I would personally recommend getting ongoing phishing training rather than just like a fact sheet. But we can definitely provide you with something like that.
And when Fernie's saying that, she's not even on commission. I'm
not, I promise. We don't even earn anything out of that, actually. It's literally just some of the best stuff that you can give people, in my opinion.
I actually come from a training background, and one of the things that we sort of talked about was doing one-off sort of cybersecurity training. And the problem is that you do a 2 or 3 hour session with people, and they come out of the room and they go back to the day job and they completely forget about it. The way that the cybersecurity training that we provide works is you get video training on a regular basis. So they're little short videos and they're just constant reminders about things. And then it also involves simulated phishing attacks as well. So every so often you get dropped into your inbox something that says that it's come from the CEO. And if they click on it, it says, hang on a minute, you've got this wrong. Or you click on the link that tells you, yeah, this is a phishing attack. This is a simulated phishing attack. Well done, you've spotted it. So it's constant reinforcement of that learning. So that's something we can definitely talk to you about, Daniel, and it's not expensive.
Okay, thank you.
He says as a true sales and marketing person. Grace.
It's just to touch on what Daniel said with regards to the phishing side of things. Were you describing what would be on offer from the third party just then with regards to the? Yeah, okay, brilliant. We would definitely be interested in finding out more on that as well.
Okay. Lovely.
Obviously, you mentioned cost on the phishing. In terms of the helping, the assisting, the hand holding for Cyber Essentials, the initial one, not the plus, what cost involved is that involved? Sorry.
So
with
there
yourselves.
is we'd quote that individually because we'd look at its post assessment. So we have a look at the assessment, see what work's involved.
Yeah. Okay.
So
is Active
more on an
Directory
individual
requirement? Sorry, is Active Directory a requirement of Cyber Essentials? No.
No, Active Directory isn't a requirement.
Daniel, just so you're aware, we've been quoted for the Cyber Essentials because we've had all the kind of gap analysis done. And one of the things that when I was trying to go through it with the rest of the team, there was an ongoing charge, a kind of a rolling monthly thing. And I just wondered if you'd be able to explain a bit more about what that entailed.
You take that, Fern?
So sorry, the rolling monthly is basically splitting it out into monthly costs rather than a big sum, I believe. And it's just, it's basically that rather than so you've got for your renewals, because you'll have to get a renewal done the next year. Well, you don't have to, I suppose, but but if you want to keep your Cyber Essentials, you have to get it redone every single year. So it's just splitting out that cost rather than having to pay the big monthly sums, the big yearly sums, as far as I'm aware.
Okay.
And it's also that monthly, the ongoing monitoring of it. So occasionally they will change the standard. So if the standard changes, what we would look at is, rather than then waiting until the next time there's a renewal to do that remedial work and bring you back up to that standard, we'd implement that straight away. So that's included in that month.
So it's just a rolling compliance and
rolling
enabling that compliance.
Yeah.
Okay.
Rolling compliance.
No,
that's
great.
A great term. I'm gonna steal
you can have that.
Rolling
yeah,
compliance.
go for it.
Brilliant.
I won't charge you. No, that's brilliant. Thank you. This has been really helpful. Thank you to everybody.
Lovely. So now we offer a free cybersecurity assessment. You will know that as your customers. So that first part we will do. We have got an online quiz, and I will send you a link to that as well, so you can go through the quiz, and that actually gives you an idea of where you are. It's roughly based around the standard as well, so it gives you an idea of what remedial work might be required. Obviously my contact details are on there, but you've also obviously got Angus, and we'll give you access to Fern as well, so you know who to talk to about sort of the next steps in the journey. Thank you very much for your time. I hope you found it useful. I think sometimes it's nicer when there's a few less people almost, because you do get to ask all the questions. So I'd just like to thank Adam again. Thank you very much for coming along. Fantastic input as always. And Fern, for your time as well, particularly as I throw you under the bus with questions that you're not prepared for. And Grace and Daniel, thank you very much for coming along. recording will be available as well. Now I'll get an email out with that and the quiz. I've taken a note that you're both interested in talking about the cybersecurity training, but I'll get Angus to do kind of a little bit of a follow-up from this with you both as well. So lovely.
Brilliant.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you. Have a nice
Thanks.
day. Bye-bye. Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.